Also ask for continued blessings on our new leadership to lead us to the Rotary year and do good things in our community and around the world. And all these gifts that we've received, let us be thankful, and all these we lift up in his name. Amen.
Amen.
And if you will join me in the pledge, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yay.
Now in England, they toast the Queen.
Yeah.
And in Australia, they toast the Queen and the head of state of any visiting Rotarians.
Oh, very nice.
So,
I do have a bit of business. David doesn't know about this yet. Our Charlotte Burns has said that she would put her name in for our president-elect starting July 20.
I
Okay.
would say there's a good chance she'll get it.
So
I second the motion.
All in favor, you say aye, the
Well, Rick, do you think we should put this out to the club since no one else has come forward? And just let them know?
If you want me to, I can put it in the next email that goes
Okay.
out.
Why don't you put it in the next email that we're already being bugged about our president-elect? And if we did it real quick, we could get it in the directory.
Okay, I could do that next well, today's Tuesday, so Saturday's when they send it out. I could do that.
Well, we hope to have it finished by Saturday.
No,
But just say that if there's no objections, if we don't hear any objections by Thursday, that Charlotte Burns will be our president-elect.
so you want me to send it out today or tomorrow?
Would you please?
I guess I could do that. Yeah, it doesn't have to.
How
Okay.
about if we do that?
Okay.
It would be good if we could get it in the directory.
Okay. Let me. I have to get
And
off the
since she's the
screen.
only one who ever comes to a meeting that hadn't been president, well, Dick hasn't, but Dick's in California most of the time.
Let's see. Rotary
Good Dave.
Charlotte email.
For Peter's information, when I was selected president, they didn't even invite me to the meeting.
I was going to say, that's the best way to find new leadership
Yeah.
is vote in everybody who's not there.
That's right. You miss a meeting, you're president. This is not my first time as president, but anyway.
Okay.
Okay, where were we? We have,
You wanted to vote on. There was something you wanted to vote on.
Oh, well, we want to vote on whether or not we want to give $100 to Challenge Air.
Right.
do we have a second? I
I'll
second.
second it.
All in
Okay.
favor, say aye.
I.
Ayes have it. Oh, I'm supposed to wait till people say aye. Anyway,
Okay.
okay. Well, it slows things down there.
Okay.
All right, any more business that we have? There was an incident at Round Table, and I got harassed a lot. The governor introduced us. Well, I don't want to say it, but
Linda, say it.
would Linda say how she introduced us?
Oh, she introduced us, David and Linda Chris.
Oh,
And David about fell out of his chair and
I
said, but
didn't-
I didn't know about it.
I didn't get invited to the ceremony, but anyway. All right. If there's no more business, Howard, why don't you introduce the speaker before he gives up on us and leaves?
This is Peter will be speaking tonight on fireproofing your career, company, and culture. I want to thank him for coming. And I'm going to mute my microphone when you're speaking so you don't get back.
Everybody but Peter will mute their,
And then we'll unmute at the end with questions. And you can take about 20 to 30 minutes and go through your presentation at your leisure.
Sounds good. Now, most people say that I'm better to listen to muted, but we'll see how it goes. Thanks for having me today. I have not done one of these e-speeches before, so if If it seems awkward for me, it is, but I'm going to hopefully put on a good show. I think, and I'm going to speak very conversationally because I can see the four of you, all of you there, and want to speak to everybody kind of individually. We've all been through some job or some volunteer opportunity that has been fantastic, right? Great job, great organization, that type of thing. I'm guessing also every head is going to nod that we've also been through a few miserable situations that maybe we saw coming, but often took us by surprise. I had one of those, one of the latter, something that, well, I was so passionate about it, I wrote a book about my experience called The Arsonist in the Office, and want to tell you a little bit about that story. I'll go through all sorts of details about that over the next 20 minutes. Now, the toxic workplace and dealing with toxic people is probably not the most uplifting of subjects you're going to hear today. Nobody is singing happy songs about it, but I do highlight some great companies in the culture because there are so many, especially in the North Texas area, that are recognized again and again for having outstanding cultures that are great for employees, great for the productivity of organizations, and just fantastic community leaders. And I've got some of them here. Southwest Airlines, of course. TD Industries is in the construction industry. I worked with them over the last 25 years. Ryan LLC is a company that does consulting for businesses on all sorts of different subjects. Turned around their culture when they had a rough one and people were leaving at a rapid pace. Really, the CEO rolled up the sleeves, got involved, and really made something fantastic where they're ranked now in the top 50 companies in the country when it comes to culture. And then Cumulus Media, radio station conglomerate that had a horrible culture. The CEO was the first one to admit it. She came in, cleaned house in a number of areas, and did some great things. And then you'll see some other companies I've got there, Texas Health Resources, Encompass, and Alliance Data. As we know, if you've been in one of those tough workplaces, you sometimes don't know the whole story going in. There's some things that are maybe, well, just a little bit under the surface. You might have some sort of a feeling, but don't know exactly what you're running into.
Excuse me just a second. I'm trying to record, and I'm not the host, so the host has to record or give me permission. Howard, if you would record it. Okay. Anyway.
And I just need a thumbs up if...
Yeah, we don't see your PowerPoint. It's just a little thing in the corner.
I see it.
Well, all mine is just a little tiny thing in the corner.
It's full page with me.
Okay. Thank you.
You can change your view. Change it to speaker view. Okay? All right.
All right. So there's those problems that are right under the surface that they don't quite tell you about. You know, you hear about wonderful things out of your new employer or your new career. We have wellness programs. Well, sometimes the walks look like this neighborhood that I've got up there. Then other times you're told, welcome to a wonderful family business. Only they don't tell you what kind of business you're getting into. So over the next little bit, I am going to tell you a little bit about my story. I'm going to talk about what arsonists are. I have it in my book title, but I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about what they can do to organizations, to people, to cultures, and a number of different ways that you can protect yourself. And then I'm going to talk about fireproofing. Everything, obviously, that I've said so far has a bit of a fire theme. I'm going to tell you what that's based on. And then, of course, I've got one more fire-related pun in there, sparking some ideas for success that when you're in a tough situation, you know how to protect yourself. Let me tell you a little bit about my story and what drives a guy to write a book that had never written a book before and jump in head first like I have into promoting this topic in Rotaries, chambers, trade associations, talk shows, you name it. I've had a great career. I've worked for some phenomenal organizations in the political world and also in the legislative world. Now, I know that by saying that, I've probably lost virtually everybody in the audience, either somebody that's spending his time in politics or around politicians is, why should we trust anything this guy says? And I can't blame you. In fact, there's a study that the Gallup organization does every year that asks Americans to grade their view on the credibility of lobbyists vis-a-vis about 100 different other professions. And lobbyists actually come in dead last in virtually every survey. So I guess what I'm here to do today is whatever y'all have done in your careers, feel better about it, because no matter what it is, no matter what it feels like some days, there's somebody at rungs far below whatever you do. So I, as I mentioned, worked, and there come my lights. Hold on just one second. And that is the embarrassing automatic lights that go on and off if there's not activity. So if I stand up again, that's what I'm doing. So we don't have a blackout. It was a beautiful spring day, and the sun was shining. The birds were singing. I was starting a new job, and I was pretty darn excited about it. The company that I was leaving, it was being shut down by its owner, and I decided to find a new opportunity before the doors closed. I was going to be going into government affairs, which has been my field throughout my career, and found this job at a company that seemed to have a lot of things going for it. And for me, it had a great salary, great benefits. It was going to provide me some new opportunities to build some new relationships. I was excited about all of those things until I got in the door. And I'll never forget that first day, that first 24 to 48 hours being employed by this company, that I thought I was walking into, I should say, I was looking for the concealed cameras because of the conversations I started to have. Strangers walking into my office and saying, "Can we close the door and talk?" People that would come up to me, pull me into their offices and say, "Well, new guy, I'm praying for you." Now, I'm great with that. I love to have people praying for me, but it seemed like they had something in mind when they were telling me this, and no one was saying a word. The secrecy was starting, and it would ramp up appreciably after this. It was just a couple of days in, I got called into my CEO's office, and he sat me down, and I will never forget these words. Just a few feet away, he looked me in the eye and said, "Pete, welcome to the firm. Thank you for being here. And I probably should have told you all of this before you took the job, but I don't think you'd be here today." How's that for an onboarding process? Fantastic first week. And it was right about at that time, I realized I was in for the experience of my life. He began to tell me about my new coworker. In the book, I call her Hazel. Hazel was prolific in what she did. He went on to tell me that I should expect my work to be sabotaged, that she had filed at that point about 30 different complaints against people within the organization. They thought maybe blackmailing people within the organization, had threatened lawsuits against all sorts of people within the company. And this was a heads up meeting to let me know that this was my new coworker, and let's amp it up just one more step. Pete, we've given you most of her job, so you can expect that she's probably coming after you next. It was book worthy. He went on. He wasn't done. And he said, "Let me explain some things to you. as if I needed any explanation at that point, right? And said, Pete, I want to tell you a story. There was a volunteer fire department years ago, and he mentioned the state, a volunteer fire department that served an entire county, and that there were usually 20, 30 fires a year in this particular area. Well, at a certain time, over the course of 12 months, they had 80 or 90 fires popping up. And they're wondering, well, do we need to have a drive for, are people not disposing of flammable things well? Is it climate change? Who knows what it is, but they wanted to get to the bottom of it. Finally, after nudging, prodding, and poking around, the county commissioners found out what was going on. And they came to the conclusion that it was the volunteer fire department that was starting the fires. And he leaned into me as though I needed much more instruction at this point and said, so Pete, that's your coworker, that's Hazel. And I said, sir, you just called her an arsonist. And he said, yeah, that's right. She's our arsonist. And now she's your arsonist. And you got to be careful so you don't get burned. What I began to see that day, and it can happen to a lot of people in a lot of different types of organizations, from businesses on to churches, on to Rotary groups. And I'm sure not within anyone within this group, but I began to see what a troubled culture looks like. And I'm going to give you a bit of a spoiler alert at the end so you can see exactly how troubled it was. But it was there I began to learn what an arsonist in the office truly is. So now you know a little bit about the title. Time for a little CSI. Let's profile what an arsonist is. What motivates arsonists? The ones we hear about every day in the news, right? The ones that set the fires. It is often, it can be profit. It can be revenge. It can be they want to cover up other acts by burning something down and destroying the evidence. It can be they're adrenaline junkies. They may like a pat on the back for putting out the fire after they started the fire. Or it can be vandalism. They just like messing stuff up. Does this sound familiar to anybody with people you've worked for, or worked with, or for? I thought so. What do they look like? Well, they tend to be smart people because they tend to be pretty ambitious. They may want your job. They may want your clients. They may want to see you gone because they view you as competition. They're high performers. They're charismatic. They are usually sticklers for the rules until they get into the shadows. They are rarely to blame, usually no fear of any consequences, which makes them very dangerous. Little remorse because they believe that they're doing the right thing in taking you out at the knees. There's almost an amoral moral element that a lot of these folks have. And what lets them thrive? Frankly, it's all of us. It's leaders within organizations that look the other way and say, you know what, that person doesn't report to me. They may be trouble, but they're not my trouble. So in that case, leadership has the wrong priorities. You may be screening for your employees badly. You may not be asking the right questions. You may be taking those 3 references that most companies ask for, and you may be calling the cousin, the uncle, and a nephew to find out whether they're a good employee. Often companies have no idea who they're talking to, but the arsonist has put their hand-picked people in. You may have managers that simply don't care anymore, and that's a big thing when trouble starts. And that usually is not the case where managers started that way. And I'm talking about the folks that are kind of in that middle range of within an organization. It's people that learn quickly that in some cultures, running stuff up the food chain when you've got a problem is both a problem in and of itself, and it does them no good. It may mean nothing but paperwork, and you've got that employee back for another round of problems starting in a few weeks because nothing is done. You may have disengaged employees. again, they may have found out that their opinions don't matter one bit. And we see this a lot in life, I believe, in relationships, in business, you name it. People have difficulty making tough decisions. It's easier to delay things, pass the buck, do a half measure when you actually need to take on a tough problem. The problems, and I won't get into these in too much detail, but within organizations, and we're really talking about risk. Sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's corporate risk. You're talking about financial problems. Just ask anybody that was a vendor for instance, Harvey Weinstein's company. He ran the thing into the ground because of his bad behavior. The legal problems, and in some countries now, there are lawsuits being filed where the government, heard about this in Korea today, the government is cracking down on various definitions of worker abuse, and they're coming after the organizations. That's not happening in the U.S., but there are some class action lawsuits that are popping up that have the potential, and we've seen, all of us probably have at some point, the stories about what came out during the legal discovery process. And if you got a toxic organization, it's a mess. Reputations can go south. And productivity, they say you put one toxic employee in a department, you're looking at probably a 30 to 40% drop in productivity from it. And y'all probably have your own stories of having seen this at some point, a friend or a loved one that was in a miserable job, a toxic environment that had either a psychological problem or more frequently a physical problem that began to affect their heart, their stress levels, you name it. And so there's a lot of challenges that come with that. I'm going to give you today real quickly 7 things you can do. I have a lot more things in my book, but I'd be talking for, well, y'all will be asleep by the time I was done. 7 things you can do to fireproof your organizations, your life, your company, and your culture. First and foremost, as somebody who came out of the political world and someone who's done a lot of political advertising, you've probably all heard the phrase, let no charge go unanswered, right? Because if there's a vacuum, somebody will fill it. And if there's bad things being said about you, you need to respond. Not in an abrasive way, but certainly telling your side of the story, talking about the value that you provide and making sure that what's being said about you, maybe being done to you behind your back is not going to go without some sort of response that clarifies things. So that's a couple of them. Building coalitions within your organization, within your client base, people that know exactly what you do, value it, and are there to back you up in case things get rough and you've got somebody that is causing trouble within your organization. Understanding and protecting your culture, knowing what happens if you raise a concern within your company. It would make sense that in a lot of ways, if you've got a problem and it's a legitimate one and it's something involving perhaps something that's hurting your clients or that's being done to hurt your company's reputation, all these different things, you would think that the company would do something. But often it depends on who that troublemaker is, who they know, where the power lies within the organization, and that's something we all need to pay attention to. Another is knowing our blind spots, knowing what you're good at and what you're terrible at, and a lot of that comes in for how you perceive things, how you perceive other people. And so it's a lot of the understanding of office politics that can make you or break you sometimes in a company or a volunteer organization. And finally, and I would urge everybody on that, being principled and prepared to protect your culture when it needs to be.
Can I ask you what SWOT means?
The strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Sorry about that. I should have said that. But yeah, kind of going through what you're good at, what you're not, so that you, and frankly, going through it with some other people. Somebody's spouse or a good friend could probably tell you your weaknesses. better than any of us ever could in determining, where our weak points may be. And folks that are giving you problems are likely going to be exploiting those weaknesses, and they can see them perhaps better than you can. And so for your mission today, if you choose to accept it, is I would urge you to, within your organizations, number one, of course, where you have a great culture, protect it. Where you don't, create one where when there's a problem, deal with it. Because as we know, whether it's cancer or a wildfire, or you name whatever that problem is, walking away from it usually doesn't make it any better. And then, of course, fire prevention, the hiring and firing process, being informed, being prepared, checking all the boxes on those two levels, and if there's problems, addressing them. So that's what I have for you today in terms of the exaltations I want to make to you. But what I want to close with is a few different things. Let me give you a spoiler alert on where my book ends, and I think you're going to find that, and not to sell it, but kind of explain it. Me and the book I wrote are pretty inseparable, because you're going to find that I told my story. I drop you behind enemy lines with me into about the most bizarre culture that you can ever imagine. And I was tasked with working with the employee that they had determined was so toxic, so volatile, so clever in causing problems for all levels of the organization, but most acutely at the top of the organization. They said that they could not fire her. They felt that she needed to stay internal. And you can imagine the signal that begins to send to other employees, that basically, hold my beer is the message that sends, because the trouble starts at that point once you've lowered your culture down to the lowest common denominator. So over the course of the time that I spent within the company that I call the firm in the book, I found my work being sabotaged, and a manager who was terrified to deal with them. And so when I would go out, my work would be sabotaged. I'd be standing in front of an organization and seeing slides that had been put in for the first time as I'm clicking through them. I had people shot at in every way imaginable, not literal bullets, but attacks on everyone around me. It was, and again, management looked at it and thought, well, better them than me. I was followed, which is an interesting thing to talk about in any meeting. I don't know if anybody's been stalked by a coworker and had them showing up unannounced at your one-on-one meetings, but it is an interesting experience to say the least. And finally, my final act in the firm was going to the head of my organization, and it followed a night when my wife confided to me that my coworker had approached my wife and began screaming at my wife one day at an event far away from anything involving my job. Pick up her where she was speaking online and that type of thing. So in these electronic days when everything's so connected, it wasn't that hard to do, but it was perhaps one of the most disturbing breaches imaginable, when frankly I didn't know whether I needed to talk with my HR department or whether I needed law enforcement. Not exactly what you get paid to do.
How did you resolve it?
Well, they actually resolved it for me. About 2 weeks later, I got handed a severance package and told that in very carefully worded language that, they had determined they couldn't fire her, and good luck to me. Well, you know what? When they had warned me that this was the employee that they could not fire, and this is something that I learned quickly, and I learned that really one of the strongest desires we have as human beings is self-preservation. And when you start factoring in things like your pension, or if I've learned from my organization that whoever goes after this person disappears. Well, you're not going to want to go after them, are you? And that was essentially what had happened to the culture, that they had made a proverbial deal with the devil, and I'm not meaning that in any disparaging way. I just can't think of another phrase that's appropriate, but extremely bad choices on how to deal with cultural problems that most organizations, but sadly more organizations than you would think, would do, which is, let's pass this off to a manager to make sure that I don't have to deal with it. Let's erase the reporting lines so somebody else can become that person's, so that person can become someone else's problem. It happens, and especially when you've written a book and you put your phone number and email address at the back of the book. The stories I would share with you, some of them would light your hair on fire, and they're pretty amazing in that. Again, self-preservation matters, and that's why I urge organizations of all kinds, stand up, because it's the best thing you could ever do, to stand up for your employees, stand up for your productivity, stand up for, frankly, what is the absolute right thing to do, and it's going to pay off in the long run. It's not always the easy choice, but it's often the right choice.
Is that firm still in business?
They are. They sure are.
And she's still there.
It's amazing, but as you may think about it on that self-preservation angle, boy, there's few things that are stronger than that, especially when you can, frankly, reshuffle the deck and make them somebody else's problem.
Why didn't they just pay her and tell her to stay home?
Well, I guess I would say this, and I found a little bit of this when I was dealing with the situation involving my wife. That is not behavior you see every day in the workplace. It has a little more kick to it than your average bad behavior. And my gut tells me they were probably as concerned about what the results may be in some of these situations for them as I was for me. And I think especially when you're looking at problems that may be sabotage of the organization's work, leaks to the media, all these different things that can put not the arsonist in front of the cameras, but put other people in front of the cameras, they may run like crazy.
It was blackmail, basically.
Yeah, it certainly can do that. So what I've done, and I'll end on this, and happy to take any questions, and I'm going to click through and give you my contact information as well, if you'd like it, is what I just described, as you can imagine, a guy in a very niche type of field. I'm guessing the companies you've been involved in the past, not all of them had a government affairs person. Not all of them had people that were, or certainly not many of them within your organization. I found myself knocked out of the job market, I should say into the job market, with no story to tell. Imagine the hiring manager if I started reading a few sentences out of the book that I just wrote. And I realized at that time I had a uniquely strange, uniquely disturbing, but frankly, uniquely amazing opportunity to tell my story, to educate other people about what they need to worry about, because my story may have a few bells and whistles that other people's won't have, but there are destructive, toxic people everywhere that cause problems in every type of organization. So I've written this book to help those people. I am doing lots of speaking at chambers, trade associations, of course, Rotaries, and going into companies, already receiving emails and phone calls from leaders of organizations that are frankly saying, I just read your book, our culture has problems, and can you help us? And I'll tell you what, my career was blown up I faced some pain when it came to the income level, the job certainty that goes out the door when you find yourself looking for a job without a job. But I could not be more excited about the opportunity to change some lives, provide some hope, and frankly, push organizations to do what instinctively they probably know to do, but often duck the issue. So with that, and I'll just click over to how you can contact me if you want to. That's all the different ways. And wow, I'm on social media way too much as I look at all of that. If you want to reach out to me at any time, there's where to find me. And with that, love to take any questions you guys might have.
I've taken some pictures of some of your slides, and I've taken a video. Do you mind if I post that on our website?
Absolutely. And I can send you the whole PowerPoint.
Oh, okay, okay. Because of just a few slides, just to tweak it and let them get what's going on, and I'll put it on our website, or if
That's great.
you don't care, I'll put it on Facebook.
Yes. No, that's wonderful.
Okay.
So basically, what do you do when the toxic people are the ones in charge? Like the people that you're supposed to report the toxic people to are the toxic people.
and it frustrates a lot of people when I say this, but it becomes a matter of picking your battles, knowing what the terrain is, and what your survival rate is if you push back against your supervisor, your CEO. You're going over somebody's head. There's a good chance that's not going to end well for you. So what I urge people is to certainly, let's say it's a department within a company, see if you can get out and go someplace that within your organization that's good, because you want to keep that continuity up. But if the whole organization is a hornet's nest, you need to start planning your escape to move on, because you're not going to change the top leader's mind. You can get some sympathy. You can have a nice conversation and they'll pour you a nice cup of coffee. But ultimately, in few cases, are leaders completely oblivious to what's happening in their culture. And they may not like the bad behavior, but oftentimes they'll tolerate it. I mean, you look at a company like Wells Fargo, for instance, that went through a huge scandal over falsified accounts that were being created in customers' names. And it all started with some managers at the top, and then it bled down to managers in the middle that were being hit with crazy levels of sales goals. Okay, you need to have 100 new accounts set up this month. Well, how did they do it? They start making it up and having fraud take place. And like you say, or like I said earlier, folks start getting that joke, and you start having some real problems that bleed over into other parts of the company. Where in that particular scandal with Wells Fargo, when employees were saying, "Hey, boss, this isn't right," they were being escorted out of the organization, handed their belongings, and told to leave. And did their managers know that was wrong? Absolutely. But if you're in the wrong culture and your livelihood is dependent upon that bad behavior, you're going to do what you have to in a lot of cases. Or I should say, many people will do what they have to preserve their own livelihoods. As for me, yes, ma'am.
No, this last week on the news about Southwest Airlines and the 737 MAX, and how some of the employees, they knew about the problems and they were basically ignored.
It's amazing, isn't it? And that and actually, I thought you were going with another story, which
Boeing.
well, with Boeing, but the other story that was in the news this past week was Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh yeah.
Where you have somebody that it sounds like virtually everybody around him knew that this is an awful human being, but they're getting something good out of it. They're getting trips. They're getting maybe some connections to some powerful people, hanging out and having a beer with some famous elected officials. You name it. and you've got what are probably, on some level, some decent enough people in some parts of their lives that have found an ability to compartmentalize it because I'm going to get ahead if I follow these rules. It can get you far, but it can also hurt a lot of people along the way. And those are, my message is not always popular with everybody, but I firmly believe that some good can be done to help a lot of lives.
You said you've gone to Rotary meetings and everything. You probably are familiar with our Rotary four-way test.
No,
You're not.
I'm not. I need to be.
Well, we say it at the end of each meeting, and even worldwide, and it's a philosophy that of the things we think, say, or do. And David, whenever we get ready to close out, you'll hear what it is and how it has turned businesses around.
And
Excellent.
we'd be happy to have you as a member as well. You don't have to be here. It's all online. And one of the nice things as a speaker, I'm a speaker, is you meet good people through Rotary, because in most cities, the movers and shakers are all Rotarians. So if you're running an event, you go a day or two early and you go to you let them know you're coming, and they get the word out. It's the mayor, the police chief, the superintendent of schools, the people who run the big companies. So for a speaker, it's a great deal. And then they do good things anyway. I mean, they help get rid of polio and stuff like that. So
Outstanding.
yeah.
And there go my lights again, so I'll just leave it there.
I'm glad you said that. I thought my computer something went wrong.
Well, the last club Linda and I were in, we both been president of that. They have the mayor, the city manager, the police chief, the superintendent of schools, the fire chief's in another Rotary club. And particularly you get into small towns and all the movers and shakers are in the Rotary Club.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In Dallas, I've been told in Dallas County, there are 12,000 nonprofit organizations.
Yep.
So there's a lot of competition. But in a small town, there's the Rotary Club and maybe the Lions Club
Mm-hmm.
and church organizations, of course.
Sure. Yeah, I'm excited about the opportunity and getting out there to talk with as many people as possible.
Okay.
Okay, David?
You want me to close the
You're the
meeting?
president.
I didn't get to talk. I wanted to tell one story. I was on a communication committee in a helicopter plant, been there 17 years. Vice President of Engineering says, I want to hear what you think and don't hold back. Well, I held back a lot, but not enough. So my next job was was on Long Island, and the vice president of engineering, they got a new one from outside of the company, and he said, I want to hear what you think about this organization and don't hold back. I said, do you know why I'm here? And he said, no, none of that. Well, sure enough, I quit. I got an offer to come from New York back to Texas, even money, and that wasn't a very hard decision. I was walking out on my last day, and he called me and said, come in here. And he had taken notes. He took 3 pages of notes. He went through everything we talked about and what he'd done. He said, haven't done anything about that one, but it's still on the list. And I kind of hated to leave, except it was a lousy company and a lousy environment. But and the new company there, well, they had some sacred cows, some troublemakers, and for some reason they were still around after years, and they were bosses quite often, and they had to know that nobody wanted to work for them or with them, but whatever. Okay, you want me to end the meeting?
Yes.
All right. Well, the 4-way test, which has been advertised, of the things we think, say, or do. First,
Is it the
Is it the
truth?
truth?
truth. Second,
Is it fair to all concerned?
Third,
Will it build,
Will it build good
will
work
and better
and
friendship?
better friendship?
and fourth,
Will it be
will it be
beneficial to all concerned?
concerned. Now, there are some exceptions, like the one about is it the truth? Let's say if a female asks me, does this dress make me look fat? There is a self-preservation clause. And of course, I usually say something that's probably not the most politically correct, like it's not the dress. Anyhow, I live dangerous.
And then
Okay.
sometimes we have the fifth one, is it fun?
Yeah.
Or will anybody find out? So anyway, we thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Okay.
See you next week.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm going to sign up.
I'll send you a form.
Howard will send you an application.
Excellent.
Wow.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
y'all.
We welcome you.
Recording.
And Peter, so I say one thing for you, Shudder. If you get in touch with me, I'll give you my cell phone, 214-952.
Give me just one.
Yeah,
Wait,
because he wants to speak in more Rotaries. I can tell him how to do it. I can help him. I do a lot of that. I speak at a lot of Rotaries, so I could tell you how to get it done. 214-952-9150. I'm gonna go to the gym after this meeting, so I won't be home. But you call sometime tomorrow, and I'll be happy to tell you what I've been doing. I'm doing lots and lots of them, and it'll be a very effective way for you to do it.
Excellent. That sounds great. I appreciate y'all.
Just thought I'd help.
Okay.
You've been nice to
We
us.
appreciate you.
All right. Y'all have a great week.
Take care, everyone. See you next week.
Take care.
have you finished recording?
Yes.
Okay.